So I'm Don Boomer from Line 6. I'm the live sound application engineer, and I'm very glad that you all came today. I came from Los Angeles, and right now you guys are my only friends in the world. So be gentle. So we're here today at the What Next conference to maybe show you some new technologies and some new ways to use them to enhance your performances, to take control of your own musical destiny, so to speak. I assume you guys are interested in wireless microphones or you wouldn't be here, right? So who's using wireless mics now? Anybody? Anybody like to? Anybody have a friend that's using them? Well, I want to talk about wireless microphones today and basically the improvements that have happened with them. We call this wireless without worries. It's really to introduce you to digital wireless technology, because truly digital has taken a lot of the worry out of dealing with wireless microphones. This is a new hot act in America. No, not really. This is a picture of the first wireless microphone, clear back in the early 60s. Notice the compact mic case and compact receiver, although that might have been the whole PA in those days, who knows. So really, wireless mic. We're just talking about microphones that don't need a wire to get the sound from the microphone, to transport that information to the receiver onto the PA system. And that's really all that we're talking about. Basically, they've been in use since the early 60s. They were terribly horrible. They've gotten to the point of being less horrible, but they never got to be as good as wired microphones until now. So why would you want to use a wireless microphone? Well, the first thing is to just not be tied down to the system, to allow you to move across the stage. I don't dance, you'll have to trust me. To not worry about tripping over things. You can stage dive, seriously, without being tied to cables. The speed of setup. Imagine a world with no wires connecting everything, how quickly you could get your gear on and off stage. If you're a guitar player, using new digital wireless, we can remove the tone changes that your guitar cable itself makes to your system. Most people don't know, but a guitar cable is in fact a tone circuit. We can just completely eliminate that. And if you do recording like I do, which is mostly into my bedroom, we don't have to run cables through doors if I need to get something and hide it in a closet or something to kind of move the sound out of the way for the microphones. I don't have a bunch of cables going down hallways trying to run under doors. I can actually close the doors and get more isolation. But it's just more fun to not be tied down. That's the plain part about it. It helps you to connect to your audience. You can jump out there, you could dive right out there and be in with you guys right out in the pit in the front here. So why doesn't everybody use wireless? Well, up until now, besides being terribly expensive, there are three major reasons. The first is diminished sound quality. It just doesn't sound as good as a wire. It never did. The second problem is interference, having to deal with your environment and keeping that environment out of your sound system. The third thing is something relatively new, and that's spectrum issues. The world is changing with the digital dividend. You guys have changed the channels that you can use wireless microphones here. That's going on all over the world. So where the field that you can actually play on is shrinking everywhere in the world. And so it's much, much harder to find open space to work in. And that's why Line 6 really entered the game. Our head RF engineer actually is the guy that invented digital wireless microphones for audio back in the late 90s. And at Line 6, we're actually on our fourth generation of wireless products. So we've gone through a whole lot of learning things, and we think our new products are really dynamite. So let's go through the problems that people have here a little bit. The first problem is PowerPoints that don't want to work. So the sound quality. What you've had to live with in the past with FM analog wireless microphones is basically your car radio, okay? You have the same level of quality with a car radio as you have with an FM microphone. It's really the same circuit, and you know as you drive around town, things fade in and out, you pick up noise from where you go. Actually, what happens is you actually lose quality as you get farther and farther away from your receiver. So every little bit of distance, you actually lose quality with an analog wireless system. With digital, that simply doesn't happen. The quality is always the same. It's 100% or it mutes because you've gotten out of range. And the frequency response of digital is excellent. It's from the lowest to the highest, it's all there. Where with analog systems, they have a problem in the physics of actually doing the radio, and there are legal limits pressed all over the world to them. They basically make them bring in the extreme highs and the extreme lows. They don't want anything leaking out into the next channel. So they make them kind of bring it in a little bit. So they sort of have one hand tied behind their back to begin with. With digital, no such problems exist. So you may not be an expert in reading graphs, but I'd like to show you here the frequency response. The digital system here, nice and smooth, and you'll notice there's only one level. That's because digital is only one level. It's never loud or soft, it's digital information. With an analog radio, the frequency response that you get depends on how loud or how soft you go into the system. And what I want you to see here is that at a very soft level, the high frequencies don't exist the same as they do when you get to a loud level. So what does that mean? It means you're playing into a variable tone circuit. When you scream into that microphone, not only does it get loud, it gets bright. And when you become quiet, it becomes muffled. Same way with your guitar. If you bang it, you're going to get full frequency response, and as you get to the quiet passages, you're actually going to lose the sound that you're putting out from your instrument out into the air. It won't make it all the way to the end. So when you couple this problem with the limited dynamic range, for those old enough to remember these, cassettes, basically analog FM has a dynamic range of about 50 decibels, about the equivalent of a cassette tape without noise reduction. As opposed to a CD has about 90 decibels of range, and you know your live music has a little more than that. About 100 is probably a good number to figure. So just like the cassettes had to have Dolby noise reduction, in fact, they put a circuit that's very, very similar to Dolby or DBX noise reduction in the wireless, in the radios itself. And it's a little gimmick that it does take down the hiss. It's very successful, but it has a sonic penalty in doing that. In other words, it changes the sound a little bit. We're going to trade sound quality for lack of hiss in the system. It means that your whole sound isn't going to get through. So those of you that record, you know, compressors have attack times and release times. Basically what happens with the noise system is it's a compressor and an expander. Shrink the sound, expand the sound. And you know attack times and that affect how your compressor works. The circuit doesn't work real well because it's not connected. It just has to guess what it's doing from one end to the other. Basically, it means you're not going to get quick transients. Percussive things don't go well through analog wireless systems. But digital fixes that because we have no dynamic range, so we don't have any change in the system. So it's not a problem with that. Another problem with analog wireless systems is interference from local conditions. You never know what you might be in. For example, the radios in taxi cabs and trucks and airplanes could, you know, they get into your system. They're going to just come right through. They mix in the air with the radio signal, because radio in the air, analog, will allow things to mix. Motors. Maybe you've got lifts in the sound system. Maybe you've got motors in the air conditioning or refrigeration. If you're playing a club gig, the bars to keep the beer cold, refrigerators, have motors. And when those motors kick in, they put junk in your system. Or your own stage lighting. The dimmer boxes create radio waves and stuff that mix with analog. And, of course, neon signs. Where I come from in the clubs, we have beer signs. And they get into your sound system. They get into your radio while it's still in the air and mix with that system. You can't ever get it out. But digital simply doesn't have that problem because we're just sending ones and zeros. I'll talk about that a little more in a second. The third problem are these spectrum issues. Now, analog wireless microphones, up until now, have always lived amongst television channels. And you had to find an empty spot between television channels and hope you could find clear space and drop your mics in there. As you know, the television channels have been moved, and they're moving all over the whole world to allow basically for more cell phone usage. And you know, here in UK, they switched all your wireless mics at the beginning of this year to channel 38. So everything that you have has to live in channel 38. And Ofcom has a plan to allow for 10 frequencies so that you could get 10 microphones to work in that space and not interfere with the other microphones. The problem is you have to share those 10 channels with the whole of London. So when you get in an environment like this, I mean, obviously distance, I don't have to worry about things that are miles away. But in a situation like this rehearsal studio, we have another rehearsal studio on the other side. In fact, we're all using line 6 mics. We're using the same channels. We don't interfere with each other because we have a code. Downstairs, other studios across the lot. If you were using analog wireless, you have to have very careful RF coordination. If somebody just changes a channel, it's likely to show up on your radio all of a sudden as interference. So what we did, being that we're digital, it allowed us to go in other bands, and we moved to the 2.4 gigahertz range where Wi-Fi lives. And we broadcast in that range. Here's a really good thing for you guys. Because you might take your band, you know, on the other side of the channel, you're in a new country. Now you've got new laws, new licenses, new channels. You got to have new equipment. And then you go another 50 or 100 miles, another country, and you guys can go through a bunch of countries really quickly. The cool thing is, on this band at 2.4, you can use these microphones anywhere in the world. They are license-free everywhere. So you no longer have to rent gear country to country like would have been the case with analog, you know, until very, very recently. They're trying to congeal these bands, but it's still a big challenge. So at 2.4, it's simply license-free worldwide. End of story. Nothing to worry about. So you've already made the shift to digital with a lot of things in your life, pretty much everything. Your email is digital, your iTunes, iPod is digital, your television is digital. And like the first time you were able to watch a football game and see all the blades of grass in the field when you got to HD TV, you'd been watching regular analog TV forever, right? And you were happy with the football games until you see all the blades of grass. And then when you try to go back, all of a sudden your television, yeah, it just looks smeary, right? Yeah, hopefully you didn't have to save up too long before you got that new TV. It's really hard to go backwards. It's the same way with these microphones. We've just taken that technology, you know it works, you get your email, your iPod plays. We've just figured out how to take that digital information that everybody's using and just transport it through the air, through a radio. No easy task, but that's what we brought to the party. So digital is a smart system. We like to sit around at coffee shops with our laptops and get our email, right? And if you think about it, everybody that's in there is on the same channel, right? You get your email, you get your email, you get your email, and nobody gets my email except me. Because each one of our computers has a code, and it says, when an email comes into my code, I go to the screen. And when an email comes into the antenna that's not my code, it just gets thrown out. Your computer doesn't know what to do with it. And that's the same thing that happens with digital radios. So all that interference I was talking about, all that could get in the radio, it simply doesn't have an address to go to. So it goes nowhere. It's thrown away. we're just immune from that kind of stuff printing into the system and getting into audio. But occasionally we lose some bits of information. You probably know about it. Well, maybe you don't know, but if you ever take a CD and flip it over and hold it up to the light, you'll see thousands of little scratches in it, right? Every one of those scratches is wiping off bits and bits and bits and hundreds of bits of digital information. Those numbers are gone, right? But when you put it in your CD player, it just works. It makes music. It doesn't skip and pop and jump. It just plays. Because in a digital system, digital is smart enough to figure out what it lost. We call it error correction. I'll kind of show you about that. What we're sending is a string of ones and zeros. We're sending a code of numbers, and not the audio itself. Now, analog systems actually send the real signal. If you lose any little bits of it, even thousands, hundreds of thousands of a bit, it's just gone. But in digital, if we just miss a number every once in a while, the computer's smart enough to figure out what numbers are missing. So let me show you. If you remember the days of dot matrix printers, right? You had beautiful type that looked like this. If you ever had your printer head get a little dirty, you might have ended up with dots that look like this. Now, if you read that, and you read that, out your lips will come exactly the same words. Because truly, your brain doesn't know how to say this word with those things missing. It fills it back in. And that's what the computer inside a digital radio can do. When we can lose thousands, tens of thousands of bits of information, and the code can simply, it has a checksum. It heals itself. So we're able to write all that back in so that when you say that phrase and when you say that phrase, it's exactly the same out the speaker. There's no loss. With analog, if we lost the little bits, they're little ticks and pops that are just gone forever. So that's called error correction. That's one of the cool tricks you can do with digital. But also with digital, you can do things that have never existed before. So one of the things we're good at Line 6 is modeling. You probably know all about the guitar amplifier modeling, where you can take a guitar amp and make it sound like hundreds of different amplifiers by modeling that sound. Well, we built a computer inside this, and that's how we get the digital radio. But there's some left over. And we thought, well, with what's left over, why don't we model some microphones? So basically what happens here is inside this unit, at the push of a button, I can switch it to be different microphones, and I'll show you that right here. But it's a glasses moment. Okay. So this is our Line 6 model. This is one that we made out of the best parts of all the microphones. I'll switch it, and now I've become a Shure SM58. You hear it change. And now I've become a Beta 58. Now I've become a Sennheiser 835. Basically, there's 10 microphones inside this. Here's the really cool thing. What you probably never had is the ability to grab a whole bunch of mics out of the box when you go to start singing, plug it in and go, well, do I sound good? You know, well, do I sound good now? This is an Audio-Technica 4100. This is one of my least favorite vocal mics in the world. But you probably noticed it got really screechy and bright. But there's one thing that this microphone's really good for. It's really good for the day that your PA won't quite cut through and be loud enough. So there might be an occasion where it might be more important to have this sound and really cut through than to have the most perfect tonal sound for your voice. But the cool thing is, you just push the button and you can, I don't want to stay on that sound, excuse me a second. I'll go back to Line 6. The other thing it let us do was build a microphone that doesn't exist. So when we model, we measure all these different microphones, and we took the parts that we liked from other microphones, and we actually improved what you could do with those microphones, there's only so much you can do mechanically before you run out of options, right? But electronically, this has an extended frequency response that you cannot do with just a microphone element to have this sound. Yes, sir? No, it has to be done physically on the microphone itself, yeah, for this one. But we model these other microphones, and so now you have choices. Choices is always good. Yes.
So those microphones, they will have the same quality for live performance and for working in the studio.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You're not tied to. So obviously you don't know you have better microphones for live performance.
Right. Yeah.
So
You could.
work fine.
You can work fine any way you want to use them. In fact, there's actually another thing you can do. You can actually unscrew the microphone and actually screw other manufacturers' microphones onto this if you don't like the models that we have. We have different models in different price ranges, just depending on what you do. But like I said, you've probably never shown up at a gig with 10 microphones that you could pull out, plug in, and go. It's just a really handy thing to have. You know, you may have your favorite, but like I said, your favorite in one room might not be your favorite in another room. And that's what you get to do with this that you've just never been able to do before. But with digital, you know, comes things you've never been able to do before and other things as well, you know. So which way would you want to go if you're thinking about buying new wireless microphones? And what I want to say to you is you can go to different manufacturers of digital, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to go analog. Analog is just lower sound quality, which we fixed. You're going to have to deal with the channels. If you move around, you're going to have to get different channels. The channels are going to change on you. These laws are consistently changing. The band that we're operating in is a protected band. It's actually overseen by an entity of the United Nations, so it's a world thing. They got to change it everywhere. You have to have an awful lot of countries make changes, not like Ofcom can do, like they did for your channel 38. And there's just no interference. Digital is just immune, just like getting your email and not getting anybody else's. You're not going to get any junk in these microphones. If a police car goes by with the radio keying on and off, it's not going to show up in your performance. So you get awesome sound. You get better sound than you've ever had before. The other thing that's kind of neat about this is the price is coming down, because actually it turns out it's less expensive to do it this way. It's less costly. So you're going to get better performance at lower price than you've ever had. I'm sorry? Well, different manufacturers have different price ranges. The Line 6 units from about 230 pounds to about, I think we're just at about 400 on the high end. We have 3 different ranges. We also have some other kind of cool things. If you're a guitarist, for example, you don't have to have a rack-mounted unit. We make pedal board units, so you can put this down on the floor, you know, with all your pedals. You don't have to run cables back in and out. Just kind of a neat thing that, you know, there's a need to do it that way. So we were able to do that because it's a much smaller package. And we have there's some other brands, you know. We like to think we've done it the best. You go out and try them. That's up to you. There's other, Shure has a system in the 2.4 range now. AKG does. We have 3 different levels of systems. Like I said, the most simple system is really very easy. The nice thing with the Line 6 stuff is you don't have to adjust anything. There's really no setup. It's really as simple as putting the batteries in it. You just select a channel because all the channels work. So you just tell it what channel you want to be on, turn that on 6, turn this on 6, turn it on, and it's ready to go. It sets itself up. So you don't have to dial in pads and squelch and gain and all those things you had to do before. Much like your HDTV, right? You used to have to adjust the contrast and the brightness and the color balance and stuff. And now they've taken that all away, because the good thing about digital is Once you make the signal digital, once you've broken that analog down, once you take the sound from my mouth and make it a string of ones and zeros, it's very portable. And as you move it from place to place to place, you don't lose anything, right? It's still the same code of ones and zeros, it just moves. And you can copy it time after time after time, and there's no loss. So that's why there's none of those controls in your television set anymore. It simply comes into your TV exactly the way it leaves the TV station. There's no loss in the transmission. We can take it from point A to point B, and it's exactly the same thing when it gets there. That never happened before. You were always at the mercy of your environment, your distance, all, the physics, all those things added together to make it a much more difficult way to go. So what I want to say is, don't be afraid of wireless. It's not going to bite you anymore. You don't have to worry that you have to be so smart to use it, because the computer just automatically takes care of all those things for you. It's affordable now, and it's better sounding than it ever was. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions that you have. As technical as you'd like to get, or as simple as you'd like to get, whatever I can do to help you. Model that I'm using now? This is a V75. This is our most expensive one. It's right around $4. This has 10 different models. The sound quality of everything we make is identical because it's digital. It's the same ones and zeros fly through the air. The more expensive models have other features. The lower priced ones don't have as many features or as many channels, or maybe the distance, but the sound is exactly the same. So if you don't need to broadcast a great distance, you don't necessarily have to buy the most expensive one. The little one that's, I think it's 239 pounds. If you want to have your own personal microphone, take it with you gig to gig, is excellent.
What is the range? How far can you go?
The range. That's an interesting question, so I'll tell you the truth. The range always depends on how much stuff is around you that's getting in your way. The range on this microphone, if we take it out in a field with nothing else, no other radios interfering, and no metal to bounce off of, is probably 200 meters. On the outside of the box, we call it 100 meters. Because the general rule of thumb is when you take a microphone indoors, which is where most people are going to use it, you can count on about half. That said, it depends how much metal's in the room. Metal is not my friend because the radio waves bounce off funny. Radio is still radio. Radio is not analog or digital, it's that electromagnetic thing. It's the same everywhere in the world. So if we were in a metal Quonset hut, not as far as if we're in a stone building. But the good news is most people don't use wireless microphones at anything approaching the range that these can do. Normally, the time distance would bother you, right? So normally you're using it at 10 or 20 or maybe 30 meters. That's pretty far. So like I said, the range on this is 100 meters if you don't have too much interference. There's going to be some place on the planet where you're going to have a lot of interference and the range is going to be very short, but typically no.
On the same subject, you mentioned stone face. So if you have you mentioned going in one room and on the other to record something. If you have a really thick wall, is that going to interfere with the sound?
Yes, and that's your friend. Because what I don't want are those wireless microphones that are in that other room coming into this room. Most of the time, I mean, it's hard to sing on one side of a wall and have people hear it on the other side of the wall because you can't hear it, right? So most times, for most people, there's no advantage in going through walls. But there's a big advantage that they block outside junk from coming in. So outside interference comes into my antennas, right? It comes into the box. The electronics have to deal with it. They have to throw that away. We would like to have zero interference, but it's almost never that. And so we're always trying to eliminate all the problems that we can have. So like I said, for almost everybody, walls and keeping the outside world out is a good thing. Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's a good question. So yes, it is. It's diversity in the way that you know, but also we do a thing that nobody else does. We do a thing called frequency diversity. So what we're doing is we're splitting our digital information into sub-packets, and we transmit them to multiple channels all the time, and we hop every 300 nanoseconds to a different channel. So we're already moving around, because if something's going to be there, we're already gone, right? Everybody else just does one. So we actually have 2 receivers, each seeing both of the antennas. So what you're getting is 4 antennas, 2 receivers on 4 frequencies. Think about that. Everybody else is getting 2 antennas on 1 receiver. Actually, some very expensive radios have 2 receivers, and they switch back and forth. The other thing that's really neat, though, about the way we do diversity is we don't actually have to turn off one and turn on the other. We're just looking at the code. So with other systems, they have to switch from this one to that one. And there's always some little element of crossover in that usually it's pretty tiny, but there is some sonic penalty to that. We're just looking at the numbers, so it never affects the sound. So we have, I guess that makes it the most diversity possible. You could actually be on 4 radio channels with 2 receivers and 4 antennas. If I could work the math backwards, I'd have been a mathematician and not a musician. I can tell you other features of the microphone now. The AA batteries, 8 hours, so you're using the inexpensive batteries. You don't have to use the big 9-volt batteries anymore that cost a lot and don't last as long. Let's see, so we have, this is our top line stuff, the V75s. I think I have the other ones in the other room, but we're actually using these here. These will allow you up to 14 channels. That's probably our limitation. We are broadcasting on a very small band, so we can't use a lot of channels together at the same time. But for most people, that they're using 6 or 8 channels is a lot of channels. So you put the most important ones there that you need the best sound with. So this is the belt pack. Yeah, you either put this on your strap. It's actually the same radio as if I used a lavalier microphone, or if I used a headset microphone, I'd put this on my belt. There's some very little changes between what we do for guitars and what we do for vocal microphones, but it's basically the same transmitter. It's very versatile. In fact, you can, if you wanted to, I could use this microphone and I could transmit into a floor pedal. So if you were the type of artist, we had a guy here a minute ago that was a beatboxer or something. If he also decided he wanted to loop and stuff with pedals, he could use this mic into that receiver, go into loopers, and do all the kind of manipulation that folks do with that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously you could do that with your guitar unit as well, but you're not limited to that. You could do it with a microphone. So if you wanted to do all that and put a microphone on your saxophone, for example, or you wanted to beatbox and sing it, or if you just wanted to deliver a very screwy oration, I guess. I don't know why. Never mind. I just think silly things sometimes. But why limit yourself, If you can make music with it, go for it. And that's kind of why we're here today, is to point out all kinds of new technical things, so you can move to the next step and incorporate these things instead of same old stuff. In-ear monitors. We're looking at in-ear monitors. Right now, probably our channel limitation is our problem. We just simply don't have enough channels. By the time we outfitted you with in-ear monitors and microphones, we'd run out of channels. However, they would sound really, really good. Because you're limited right now, you can only get analog in-ear monitors. So yeah, the sound would be spectacular. The sound would be the difference between listening to MP3s with bad earphones compared to a big hi-fi system. Again, you get all that dynamic range, you get the diversity. There's so many advantages. We can hardly wait. But at line 6, really our goal is to eliminate all the wire on a stage. We want every wire to be gone. So we're working very hard to make wireless be as reliable as wire, sound as good as wire, and be the same price as wire. we're making great strides. We hope to be exactly there someday, so that you could do things, for example, like instead of having to connect these speakers with wires, wireless little plug-ins, we could do something like that. Instead of, what'll be really fun would be like when you get to a drum set where you've got 6 or 8 or 4 or 12 microphones. It's hard to get that on and off stage because there's so much stuff you got to unplug and all those cables and all that stuff. So imagine if you could put a little transmitter on each one of the microphones on the drum kit, right? Then even, you know, for if you're on the kind of stage where you could roll on and off, you could roll the whole kit off, right? Let's put all the receivers in the snake and make it go wherever it goes. Or even if you don't, even if you're just in a club, you could just pick up one drum and walk off the stage. You don't have to deal with the cable and the mic and all that stuff anymore. So same way with your amp. In fact, we put a model of SM57 in this just for people that want to mic up acoustic stuff. So I think with that we shall conclude. I'll be here all afternoon if anybody has any other questions they come up with. Happy to help, and thank you very much for attending.